Alright, Chet. So, Lev, you say cold fusion science. Kaboom, what do you think? Do you want to do Charlie or do you want to do cold fusion science? A la Fallout. I'm thinking some cold fusion science might be very interesting. Yeah, let's do some cold fusion. So this is Kyle Hill, and he is great. I love watching him. You want to do Charlie? Okay. Tell you what, I will make it fair. I will, since I have 1 and 1. Hang on. Charlie or Kyle? Because they both have long hair. Alright, I'm gonna make this fair. I am going to flip a coin. Actually, hang on. Give me a second. Okay. Alright, Chet. Where'd it go? There we go. Alright. So, we're gonna say... So we'll say heads is cold fusion with Kyle. Tails is one of 2 Charlie videos that I have set aside saved to watch. So, heads, Kyle, tails, Charlie. Ready? Main fusion is. We'll watch Charlie afterwards. I'm not saying we're not gonna watch Charlie, but we'll watch Cold Fusion first, and then we'll do Charlie.
Hello there, Vault Dweller. It's good to see you in...
And I did get a chance to do countdown because it auto-played on me. Okay. Let me fix myself. Looks like he may be standing over there, so I'll put myself over here. And I'll also get rid of these real quick. Hi. So, let's see what Fallout got wrong with Cold Fusion. Here, 3, 2, 1, let's go!
Hello there, Vault Dweller. It's good to see you in the flesh that you still have.
Yes, Kyle is... Little too much beard for my taste, but yes, he has a very Viking look to him. He looks like a big, beautiful Viking. But a little too much beard. A little too much beard for my taste.
Have on your body. It's come to my attention that a number of you have been wondering about the feasibility of a certain new technology from the Fallout TV series. Well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that this technology would certainly be worth sending a knight, a ghoul, and Jinx from League of Legends after. The bad news is that I don't think the show actually needs this technology, or even understands it. Welcome to the facility.
Doesn't understand it? I imagine so. Because, let's face it, Fallout was... It was very retro future. That was that's kind of like the fun with Fallout, is Fallout always felt very retro futuristic. Which was like part of the attractiveness of its that aesthetic. I'm very curious to see why you thinks that it's not needed though. Because Cold Fusion is kind of like... Cold Fusion right now is the dream. Cold Fusion is free, unlimited energy for everyone. So I'm really curious here.
Now entering the facility.
Before we begin today, dear viewer, warning. We will be spoilering most of Season 1 of Amazon's Fallout TV show. So if you have not seen the show yet and you want to, in 15 minutes, you are legally allowed to leave. Now, Season 1 of the Amazon show revolves around this thing, this little glowy capsule device thingamajigger-babababah. In the last episodes of Season 1, we learned that this tiny glowing capsule is in fact...
Cold fusion. It's limitless energy.
Now, cold fusion implies the existence of hot fusion, and that's the technology you'd be more familiar with. But first, fusion is the energetically profitable process of forcing two less stable atoms together into one more stable atom. This transformation from less stable to more stable releases energy that can be calculated by comparing the mass.
Hey, Lev, recognize this? This one should be familiar to Lev.
Masses that you start with and the mass that you end with, and then multiplying this so-called mass defect by the speed of light squared. Though the science said we could do it, siphoning off the energy from, say, deuterium and tritium fusing into helium was purely theoretical for decades. The sun and all stars can do it, but that's because stars have the Mojave melting temperatures and pressures needed to overcome the strong nuclear forces inside of atoms. It wasn't until very recently that humanity figured out how to create these conditions, and we still haven't made it energetically profitable. What stars do and what experiments like those at the National Ignition Facility in the United States do is hot fusion. Cold fusion, therefore, is fusion that occurs at much, much lower temperatures. Temperatures like
What's not true? You talking about the hot fusion experiments here? Well, I think what I think Kyle is trying to say is it's not profitable, energetically profitable on a large scale. I think the energetically profitable fusion experiment was on such a small scale, it's not going to be energetically profitable in some way. It's the starting point, and people may be building upon it to that point, but it's. But I believe he's referencing scale in this case, not the fact that it exists or not.
room temperature, temperatures at which your hair still looks amazing even though you're pushing 300 years old. The good news is that nuclear fusion is many times more energetic than nuclear fission, and so if cold fusion actually existed, it would be worth sending an entire wasteland after. The bad news is that I think the writers of the Amazon show have fallen for misinformation surrounding some of the most infamous experiments in all of science.
Is it bad that I have the hots for a radioactive cowboy now?
No, Arya. We're all Ogglins the Gogglins these days.
No, Kyle, do not remove your nose. Your nose is fine just the way it is. Trumir
Today's episode is sponsored by Radiacode. Radiacode is the maker of the world's first pocket-sized radiation detector and spectrometer made specifically for nuclear enthusiasts, science nerds, natural science lovers like you and me. That's right, we actually have a Geiger counter sponsor on the channel. Who would have thought? Ooh, and it gives that satisfying clicky sound. Radiacode's latest, my go-to and current scintillating scintillator, is the 103. It's a sleek, sexy, ultra-fast, and sensitive detector. I've been using it everywhere, from airplane X-ray screeners to mountain hikes. The 103 is a powerful little device for any nuclear enthusiast. It has an isotope identifier, spectrum analyzer, can track radiation with Google Maps over time, provide energy and temperature compensated dose rates and spectrums, has a food testing mode for contamination, and has a mobile and PC app with extra features with even more to come. Here's just one example of the very cool stuff you can do at home with your very own personal scintillator. Here I have a piece of uranium ore. I'm going to move this piece of ore to different distances to demonstrate the inverse square law before my very eyes. So I'm gonna place at the origin. Ooh, that's a spicy meatball. 5 times that distance away. It's 5. 10 times the distance away. 20 times the distance. Quickly plotting these numbers on a graph, we see the famous inverse square relationship. It's science, baby! If you have a...
Okay. I have preached, and I still do, that you should never buy something that is pitched by a YouTuber. And I hold true to that. But damn if that isn't tempting. He makes a fantastic presentation for this thing. So damn if I'm not tempted. But still, don't buy something that's shilled by a YouTuber. It's 9 times out of 10, it's a scam, it's fake, and you're just gonna lose your money. But he does a really good job. I'll admit it, he does a really good sales job.
Nuclear enthusiast friend or family member like me, or R1 yourself, go to the comments, go to the description, use that URL, get yourself one of Radiacode's offerings today. It's scintillating. Just listen to how much it clicks. Is that bad? We already went through Cold Fusion in another episode about a video game with characters that made you confusingly horny, but just to recap, about 100 years ago, scientists discovered that the element palladium could store within it, at room temperature and thousands of pounds of pressure, hydrogen gas, about 900 times its own volume of hydrogen gas. Now, hydrogen can also be heavy hydrogen gas, like deuterium and tritium, which is fusion fuel. And so in 1927, scientists tried to cram so much hydrogen gas into palladium metal samples that it fused at room temperature. Except that didn't work, and so all the way back in 1927, cold fusion was already kind of dead. That was until 1989, when electrochemists Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons made international headlines with the tabletop device you see right here. It used a power source, heavy water, and palladium electrodes. According to the duo, the device would suddenly and without explanation almost double the heat it was generating. They claimed that only fusion reactions could explain this.
This device actually sounds familiar to me, but I can't place it. I can't think of I seem to recall hearing about this, but the name of it escapes me. And it must have been a while ago that I heard about it. Oh, this is gonna bug me. I'm gonna play the video because it's gonna bug me until they say what it is.
Scientists around the world, however, were immediately skeptical. The duo didn't initially publish their experimental protocols, which is a big no-no, and when specifics were published, the excess heat reported was 1 degree Celsius, not 20, which could be explained by any number of experimental errors. Not a single scientist was able to replicate Pons and Fleischmann's results, and so, within just a few weeks, cold fusion was again declared dead, and the term became synonymous with a scientific pipe dream. I can totally see why the writers of the Fallout TV show went with cold fusion as their science-y MacGuffin. It's science-y, it's potentially extremely powerful, and it's had anti-government, anti-capitalist conspiracy theories surrounding it for literally decades. Makes it perfect for a Fallout game. However, like having human batteries in a universe that already has nuclear fusion doesn't make much sense, cold fusion in a
Well, okay. With the Matrix thing, I remember why they did that. The explanation for that was the machines were solar powered, and so humans basically detonated, nukes and like blocked out the sun. They created nuclear winter to block out the sun. So they put humans into the pods to harness the electrical impulses in their bodies and in their brains. And honestly, I'm guessing that maybe they weren't able to run nuclear facilities, maybe, or who knows, maybe the cumulative energy that the machines were able to gain from placing every single human on the planet into these energy siphoning pods surpassed nuclear energy and what it could do. Because don't forget, at the time, nuclear energy was just a turbine spin. Nuclear energy spins a turbine. Perhaps perhaps nerve conduction energy and the brain conduction energy in the human body, cumulative of 6 billion people, maybe that surpassed nuclear. And at the same time, they don't have humans trying to kill them. So, maybe.
Fallout universe is a bit confused to me.
Look, I'm just saying that I kind of like that he doesn't have a nose.
No, Arya, I know. We've all gone goo-goo for Goggins. That's all of us right now. Okay, so now it's time to take fictional technology way too seriously, as I want to do. I know that this little pellet thing is supposed to be cold fusion, but what is it? Is it a small nuclear reactor? Is it a small tabletop thing that you put in your... What is it? It looks like a fuel pellet like the NIF would use, but that's just a fuel pellet. It is just heavy hydrogen in there. It's not unlocking some sort of proprietary process. If you could reactivate a fusion reactor in the wasteland, it could power a large area, and that would be cool, but I'm confused about that too. The, chicken lover says that regular hot fusion cores are hard to come by these days, implying that fusion power in the wasteland is mostly, if not totally, gone. And if that's the case, then yes, cold fusion would be much easier to repower the wasteland with, because you don't...
I'm gonna say, based on what we're seeing, 'cause I didn't watch the Fallout show past episode 1. I saw episode 1, because a streamer did a Let's Watch after the stream. And so I watched the first episode, that's it. My guess is with the big benefit in the cold fusion is because it's so tiny. This is probably just a fuel source that goes into a machine like this, and the small little pellet of cold fusion is what powers everything. So my guess is the concept in the show was this tiny little cold fusion pellet would be the fuel source for entire cities. So you could power an entire city with just this one tiny pellet. And I'm guessing it's a power source that would never run out. Or if it did, it would take hundreds of years to run out. That is my guess for what the big draw for this little cold fusion pellet pill was in the show.
Need, I don't know, a tokamak. However, the show also says that Lee Moldaver has been trying to get Vault-Tec's discovery to the rest of the world for the last 200 years, indicating that cold fusion is some kind of massive improvement on the fusion that they already had. But fusion is fusion. The atoms are the same. The energy released is the same. Cold fusion would not produce more energy than hot fusion. It would be much easier to produce, sure, but if the Fallout universe already has that, hot fusion that's so easy you can put it in your stove, the show is giving the impression that cold fusion is something far beyond hot fusion in terms of energy density, but it's not. It would not be like going from coal power to nuclear power all of a sudden. The show's implication that it would be tells me, a science boy, that some writer on the show was maybe taken in by the very misinformation that made the term cold fusion an insult in the first.
I'm more inclined to believe that they went with the cold fusion MacGuffin because cold fusion has been the cold fusion has been and continues to be the holy grail of energy sources. And so even though they have hot fusion in Fallout in forms of fusion core, I'm not sure if the fusion cores in Fallout have some kind of a radioactive component to it. Like they're dangerous, like they could be radioactive or anything like that. I don't know. But that's my guess, is that with the cold fusion, number one, obviously it's not as big. It's not this really big fusion core. And maybe they'll also argue it's not as dangerous. That fusion cores maybe they get easily damaged and thus they could explode. My guess would be the size. that cold fusion cores are much smaller and therefore easier to transport. I also suspect, because obviously fusion cores and things like power armor to get used up very quickly. So they were probably going with the angle that cold fusion has a much, much higher energy output than the hot fusion cores. Obviously taking some artistic license with science, but that's my guess. They're saying that cold fusion has a much higher output. The volume of energy is exponentially higher, and thus it can power more things for much longer in a much, much smaller space. So that would be my guess as to why they brought cold fusion into play as far as, a MacGuffin in Fallout when they've already got hot fusion.
First place. The problems, like bugs in a Bethesda game, continue. It looks like this tube of water is connected to these wires, right? Which are presumably providing power to the wasteland, which we see. Fusion power, however, even in theory, doesn't work like this. Basically, every major power source in history, from coal to oil to natural gas to nuclear, is simply a way to turn water into steam. That steam is then used to turn turbines and thereby generate electricity. This tube looks like boiling water, which is good, but it's certainly not enough for an entire city. Real nuclear fission plants are huge and move
This is just Hollywood interpretation. I'm recently sure that almost every sci-fi Hollywood interpretation of some kind of fusion energy device involves basically just computers hooked up to a tank of water that starts to boil when you add the fusion element to it. It's Hollywood artistry. I think that's all it really is. There's a saying that I learned from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and who got this from Mark Twain, is understand the science, and then you can bend it to your then you can bend it, play around with it to your leisure to fit your story. So I think that's the case here. Is they just they I think they may know the science, but they're doing what Hollywood always does, and they're playing around with it to make it look better. Because the reality is, if they built something that would actually run on cold fusion, it would probably look very boring and not cinematic. And I really think that's the pure reason behind it, honestly.
not enough for an entire city. Real nuclear fission plants are huge and move thousands of kilograms of steam per second through massive turbines. All we needed for this in the show was the sound of giant machinery spinning up somewhere. Without that, it again implies that this tiny capsule is somehow generating an amazing amount of electricity by itself. But that's not how hot or cold fusion works, even theoretically. And I know it's a TV show and actors need to, be on set next to things, but no matter if it's fission or fusion, you do not want to stand right next to an exposed nuclear glowing thing. Enough nuclear fusion reactions to power, say, Los Angeles, would create so many high-energy neutrons, hundreds of trillions of them, in fact, that it would immediately kill everyone in the area. There's a reason why fusion reactors are thought to present, quote, the greatest structural materials development challenge in history, and why modern nuclear power plants have entire buildings dedicated to shielding and containment. Unfortunately, shielding doesn't look great on camera. What does look good on camera is the first cool-looking thing if you just, Google cold fusion. I'd be very surprised if this exact device, which is not generating electricity by the way, it's just a vacuum chamber filled with pretty purple plasma that checks for evidence of low-temperature fusion reactions, wasn't the exact inspiration for the prop or the prop master on the show. Pretty close, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And that's the thing with Hollywood. A lot of, when reality and science is too boring, they will borrow from other aspects to make it look interesting. It's why, it's why you end up having things like the CSI effect that has plagued the court system for decades. Um, I don't know if you had ever heard of this, but when when the show CSI first came out many years ago, it was a huge success. Everybody loved it. It combined a police procedural with science and made it really engaging and fun to watch. The downside to it was that because it's a TV show and you only have like an hour to tell your story, they greatly quickened the amount of time it takes to collect and process evidence. They shrank. They took an investigation that normally is months or even years long in scope and contracted it down to just a couple days. So, yeah, a processing a crime scene, collecting the evidence that took maybe an hour or two, and then doing stuff like fingerprints that only took 5 minutes. You just stick it in the computer and the computer finds a match. They do DNA evidence that takes maybe a couple hours. Tire tread impressions. Oh, they're able to find a match in some mysterious database that has a listing of all tire manufacturers. It was all like there were nuggets of fact in there, and they were lost amongst a sea of movie magic, TV magic. Fingerprints, typically speaking, for the average police department, if you collect fingerprints at a crime scene and you send them off to the crime lab, you're waiting many months, honestly, before a lot of times for the majority of cases, with the exception of really high profile stuff like homicides. You're waiting months to get any information back from the crime lab on the fingerprints, and it's not always conclusive either. Tire treads and paint chips. There is no such thing as a database of car paint manufacturers and the chemical composition of said paints, or tire manufacturers where they have the treads of their individual tires that they made in some magical database that you can compare it to, where boot imprints and things like that. It's so what happens is police, they would do evidence collection. They would have their crime scene investigators or evidence technicians collect evidence at the scene, but if they made an arrest before all of the evidence was fully processed by the crime lab, and that case goes to court, and they didn't have the fingerprint analysis already, or they didn't have a shoe print analysis, or they didn't have the DNA, or they didn't have DNA evidence to present, you had juries that were refusing to either they would not convict or they would become deadlocked because they watched CSI and they thought, well, the police should have had this in 2 days. Why don't they have this evidence? They should have had all of this evidence to support their case within 2-3 days. Why are we not seeing it? And so what ended up happening is, for jury selections, especially if there was a concern about evidence, in terms of evidence collection, I think they would ask, like, have you seen the show CSI? And if they did, a lot of prosecutors would try to have them excluded because of this false impression people got from watching this show. So again, we're seeing that here with this, and we see it with a lot of TV shows. This is a widespread thing, where a TV show will present something that looks sciency, and I'm sure probably many sciency words are thrown around, but in reality, there's kernels of science in there, but they have been significantly dramatized to look good on the big or the small screen. And you see that a lot with jobs too, where a lot of things just get overblown or dramatized, so it looks really cool. But the reality is, when you get down to it, it's nowhere near as fun or as interesting as they present it. So, yeah, it's something to think about. If you see something on TV or the movie and you go, "Wow, it'd be really cool I'd really like to do that." Just remember, chances are it's being blown way out of proportion.
This real device is actually a cold fusion experiment funded by Google, so that's spot on, but it's an experiment, like all of the others, that failed to replicate the Pons and Fleischmann claims from 1989. And again, it's not generating electricity. I know I'm being pedantic here, but I'm worried that just a quick Googling from somebody is the reason why this artifact is cold fusion and not something else that would be a lot better and cooler.
All right then, science boy. If you're so smart, what would you have done?
I'm so glad you asked, Arya. The main tension in the TV show is between the future of humanity and the secrets of Vault-Tec, right? So instead of having cold fusion in a world that already has totally viable sources of hot fusion, you make the artifact something else, something secrety and sciency. If and when nuclear war happens, electromagnetic pulses are going to wipe out the power grid, or at least a lot of it. Even if you have fusion power, you won't have anything to send the power around with. But in my scenario, Vault-Tec knew this. They were actively bringing on nuclear annihilation after all, and along with all the vaults, the company installed thousands of miles of EMP-hardened power cables that connect the vaults across the United States, kind of like the world-spanning cables that make the internet possible. In my scenario, the artifact could then be something like the access codes to enable these power transmitting cables, in effect repowering the country, because the vaults still have their hot fusion power cores. This plan would give enormous power to Vault-Tec, the vaults, and their overseers, just like the show. And this change to the artifact would also give narrative reason for Lucy to return to her vault at some point, for the Enclave and for the Brotherhood of Steel to visit other vaults and discover their secrets, and for the Ghoul to explore more of his Vault-Tec connected past. I don't know, maybe specifically the access codes are a way to break through the hardest possible version of the Fallout minigame we see in the show, something that could be hinted at by...
So, no, the main character is Lucy. She is a vault dweller from, I can, like I said, I've only watched the first episode, so I can give you a very basic, very basic idea. So Lucy is a vault dweller from Vault 333, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the storyline is, her vault is one where everybody is happy, they're well fed, they're well educated, they're physically fit, and apparently they once every, I don't even know how many years, they will have sort of like a merging with another nearby vault, where that vault will send over, I guess, their top pick of men from a physical specimen standpoint, and he will get married to the choice made in Vault 333, which in the show is Lucy, and the two will procreate. I'm not even sure how many kids they're supposed to have, but it's basically a way so you don't get a crap ton of inbreeding within a vault. And things, that's how this show opens. And I would say, because I don't want to spoil too much for you, things go awry, as things in shows are wont to do. And circumstances lead to Lucy leaving the vault and going out into the wasteland. And this is like the first time she's ever been in the wasteland. her entire life, as well as the lives of most of the Vault dwellers, have been inside the vault. They have not left. They only know that the wasteland has a radioactive apocalyptic hellscape. So she has to go into the wasteland, and along the way, she encounters, and there's like 3 different storylines. There's Lucy's, there is the Ghoul, Walton Goggins' character. He would be considered, I almost would consider him to be like a co-star, because from the impression that I got, he gets just as much screen time as Lucy does. So his thing is, he's a ghoul, and they do a lot of exploration of his past prior to the nuclear war, because he was around prior to the nuclear war, and they explore a lot of his past, his involvement with Vault-Tec, and things like that. And then there's a 3rd character, for the life of me, I don't know his name. I can't remember his name. He is a squire of the Brotherhood of Steel. And I don't know really what happens to him. Somehow he's, in power armor at some point. But he's another primary character. There's like 3 primary characters. I do think that Lucy and the Ghoul probably get more screen time than the Brotherhood of Steel character, but I don't know for sure. Like I said, I saw the first episode and that was it. I did not see any of the rest of the show. I may have to maybe look into doing that. But yeah, I mean, the Ghoul is a primary character. I got the impression that him and Lucy are the 2 main characters, but I do believe a lot of the stuff for the Ghoul is like backstory, as in flashback, where again it's examining his life before the nuclear war and his involvement with Vault-Tec. But yeah, and he has a big role in it, and I think a lot of people, Walton Goggins' character, I think he is easily the fan favorite. Everybody, all I hear about is the Ghoul. And I really don't hear anything else. I don't really hear too much about Lucy and the Brotherhood of Steel character. Everybody just loves Walton Goggins because he's probably the superior actor. Walton Goggins is a fantastic actor. And he does like the Southern cowboy thing, Southern cowboy good old boy thing real well. He does that real well. And he plays that up in this from what it looks like. So obviously he's able to really just dig his teeth into it. And it showed. It came through wonderfully. So yeah, I mean, yeah, watch it. I may have to do the same thing at some point. But I like I said, I saw the first episode up. I probably have to try and get my hands on the other episodes too.
By Lucy's brother when he starts digging into Vault-Tec terminals in Vault 31. Maybe the codes are all of the Vault-Tec executives' names. Maybe they were developed by Repcon and Mr. House, which gives a reason for Season 2 to go to New Vegas. All of it, at least to me, makes
Those badass character most shows have. I don't know what you mean. I'm not sure what you mean by what the character most shows have. Confused by that. Because the Ghoul is just Fallout. It's just the Fallout show. Are you saying something like the Ghoul as like a character archetype in shows? Are you referring to the Ghoul as like a character archetype? Well, I mean, the white-haired guy from The Witcher is Geralt. That's the main character. He's not a ghoul. Geralt in The Witcher is basically a mutant, but I mean, this isn't a medieval setting. It's a medieval fantastical setting, and he's not a ghoul. He's a mutant. They actually call him a mutant. So no, it's not the same thing. It's two completely different franchises, two completely different genres, and two completely different types of characters. Yeah, it's not the same. Now that I'll agree. Like, yeah, they would fit into the badass. So, yeah, it's yeah. The cool is yes, he's a badass, but that actually sounds a bit too crass. Cause like I said, he's a cowboy. He is like a kick-ass cowboy almost. So I mean, badass for the cool sounds a little too crass because he's got that southern charm to his character. So that's why I say badass doesn't sound quite right. But like kick-ass cowboy sounds a little bit more. Yeah, it sounds a little bit more fitting for him. Yeah. So yeah, but I mean, if you talk about like he is the badass of the show, yeah, yeah, that is a fair estimate. The ghoul is a badass of the show.
More sense, and none of it invokes ideas that died over 30 years ago.
Hey, that's not bad.
Thanks, Arya. It's almost like it's my entire job. Look, if you want to see science like that in the next season of the Fallout TV show, there's not much we can do aside from Mr. Nolan. Mr. Jonah Nolan, as your friends call you, which I am. Your agents know my agents. Just email me. I'd be happy to science advised on anything and But seriously, I am nitpicking the show here. That's only because I love Fallout so much. Look, accuracy bugs don't have to be a feature. Todd, until next time.
Yes, Todd.
Now exiting the facility.
Stick around for my full review of the Amazon TV show, but first, thank you so much to all the nerdy staff here at the facility for their direct and substantial support in the creation of this here video. If you want to join the facility, if you want to drape on a silky white lab coat that hasn't been coated with the entrails of rad roaches, that's patreon.com/Kyle Hill. Get into our private members only Discord, get videos early, get private live streams, get your name on Arya in every single video if you support us just enough. Look, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of you that have decided to join the facility. Join them. I thought the Amazon show was absolutely fantastic. To make all of the games canon, 25 years worth of games canon, and then make a new story on top of that was incredibly risky, given how gaming fans aren't the most understanding of population. So for that story to be interesting,
That's a bit unfair to say.
all the visuals to be great, the animation to be great, so many in-game references, the casting is fantastic. Walton Goggins is a character actor I've loved for years who needs to be more famous. I thought everything about it was great. I have almost no notes aside from the entirety of this video.
That was a lovely thing. Oh, yeah, and what he was saying about video game audiences not being all that understanding. What video game audiences, they are very protective of the franchises that they love. And with a game like Fallout, Amazon did the smart thing and didn't try to override any existing properties within the Fallout franchise. They, to my understanding, created something new because in a gaming world like Fallout, you have a very large playground to play with, and there are so many stories that have not been told in the Fallout world that you can tell. So people don't have an issue with you telling a new story. They don't. In a gaming franchise that will allow for it. What they'll have a problem with is if you try and overwrite an existing story with your own and thereby effectively try to decanonize an existing story.